The Battle for My Backyard, a tale of foam and retribution. The sun was setting over my quiet suburban neighborhood in Maple Grove, a sleepy corner of suburban America where picket fences and well-manicured lawns defined the landscape. I just returned from a hardware store run, my truck loaded with mulch for the garden, when I noticed something odd. A man dressed in black, like some kind of covert operative, was crouched near my hydrangeas, a camera lens glinting in the golden light. My pool, the pride of my backyard, shimmered behind him, reflecting the fiery hues of the sunset. It was a sight I'd often admired myself, but this guy wasn't here to admire. He was working. "Excuse me," I called out, stepping out of my truck. "You lost." He didn't even flinch. "Oh no," he said, adjusting his lens. "Just scouting the light." Vivian said this was part of the venue. Vivian. The name hit me like a stray golf ball. She was the sister of our HOA president, Tom, and had been wreaking havoc in Maple Grove since she arrived 2 weeks ago to plan her wedding. She'd turned our peaceful streets into her bridal showroom, barking at kids for riding bikes near her rented flower arch and demanding that one neighbor move their trash cans because they clashed with her aesthetic. I'd heard stories Vivian yelling at an elderly couple because their terrier barked during her makeup trial, or insisting another family reschedule their barbecue because it overlapped with her rehearsal dinner. She moved through the neighborhood like a queen, her entitlement as loud as a jackhammer. I told the photographer, politely but firmly, that my backyard wasn't part of any venue. He shrugged, muttered something about brides, and left. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, I was sipping coffee on my patio when I heard voices. Not from the street, but from my backyard. I stepped outside and froze. There was Vivian, barefoot by my pool, posing for photos in a glittering rehearsal gown. 3 bridesmaids hovered around her, one fanning her with a piece of cardboard while a photographer snapped away. She was laughing, tossing her hair like she was on a magazine cover. When she saw me, she didn't blink. She smiled. "Hi, neighbor," she said, as if we were old friends. "Hope you don't mind. Your pool's perfect for our shoot." I stared, dumbfounded. "You're on my property." She waved a manicured hand, holding a piece of paper that looked like a photocopied newsletter. "Your pool's in the community visual zone." Tom said it's fine. The visual zone was nonsense, and the paper was a flimsy HOA flyer encouraging residents to support community events. It said nothing about private property. I pointed this out. Vivian's smile didn't waver. "It's implied," she said. "Besides, you weren't using it. You should be honored. My wedding's going to be in vogue." The audacity was staggering. She wasn't just trespassing. She was framing it as a favor to me. I gave her 5 minutes to leave, or I'd call the police. Her smile vanished, and her voice dropped. "You wouldn't dare." I laughed. She stormed off, tossing her veil in a huff and muttering about my selfishness. That night, I found a pink box on my porch. Inside was a cupcake with frosting shaped like a wedding dress and a card that read, "Thanks for being part of our dream." No signature, but I knew who it was from. I stared at it for 10 seconds before dropping it in the trash, frosting first. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to stop her. I wanted to teach her a lesson, one she'd never forget. Not cruel, not destructive, but memorable. I called an old friend, Mike, who worked in special effects for local theater productions. I asked if he knew a way to fill a pool with something dramatic but safe. He chuckled, then asked if I was making a sci-fi flick. "No," I said. "It's for a wedding." He stopped laughing. "I've got just the thing." Mike introduced me to theatrical foam, non-toxic, biodegradable, and used in music videos and theme park shows. It looked wild, cleaned up easily, and made people scream. Perfect. The next morning, I tested a small batch in the pool. Within minutes, the water turned into a frothy white cloud, like whipped cream had taken over. It dissolved after 10 minutes, leaving the pool pristine. I grinned like a kid with a new toy. That afternoon, Vivian's photographer returned to check the light. I waved from my lounge chair, acting casual. He nodded, satisfied with the clear water, oblivious to the foam machine hidden under the diving board. That night, I set up a GoPro in a palm tree, angled to capture the deck, and prepped a backup camera in my kitchen window. I barely slept, not from nerves, but from anticipation. Tomorrow, Vivian would strut into my yard like it was her stage. But instead of stealing my backdrop, she was about to become the star of a very different show. The morning sun hit my windows with a brilliance that promised chaos. I stood on my patio, coffee in hand, surveying the pool like a general before battle. The foam machine was ready, the remote trigger in my pocket. The GoPro blinked on, recording every inch of the deck. I was prepared for anything. Around 10:30, I heard heels clicking down my side path. A sharp knock on the gate followed, but before I could answer, Vivian pushed it open, strutting in like she owned the place. Behind her trailed her groom, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and 3 bridesmaids with forced smiles. The photographer was already snapping, stepping into my hydrangeas without a glance. Vivian wore a gown that sparkled like a disco ball, its train flowing like a runaway tablecloth. She turned and waved, as if I were her assistant. "Thank you for letting us use your pool again," she said. "The HOA is so grateful. Tom said it's perfect for our spread." I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was seconds from something glorious. "Make yourself at home," I said, pulling up a chair. I set a Bluetooth speaker beside me, playing soft jazz for effect, and waited. Vivian directed her crew like a Hollywood director. "Lift the veil. Adjust the light. Keep my train off the concrete." She posed by the pool, arms raised like a statue, gazing at the horizon. The photographer barked orders, the bridesmaids giggled on cue. I reached into my pocket and brushed the remote. Then it happened. With a subtle press, a hum sounded under the diving board. Vivian didn't notice, too busy posing. But the pool's surface began to shift. A bubble formed, then another. A patch of white foam rose, spreading like a cloud. One bridesmaid saw it first. Is something wrong with the pool?" Vivian turned, blinked, and screamed. The foam surged, covering the water in a tidal wave of marshmallow fluff. The photographer backed up, still snapping, unsure if it was planned. The groom's jaw dropped. Vivian screamed again, tripping on her train. The foam rose in mounds, swallowing the pool. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. Her hands flailed, trying to swat the foam away. A bridesmaid slipped on the wet tile, vanishing into the fluff. The photographer cursed, foam on his lens. The groom finally spoke. "Maybe we should leave." Vivian ignored him, charging toward me like a soggy diva. "You ruined everything." This was my moment. I gestured to the pool, coffee in hand. "And now it is." The foam swirled behind her, glowing in the sun. She demanded I stop it, but the machine had a 10-minute cycle. She was soaked to the knees, her mascara streaking. The GoPro caught every moment her screams, her flailing, her slow-motion stomping like a deranged snow queen. I offered a towel. She slapped it away. The bridesmaids debated rescuing her or fleeing. The foam rose past her waist, and she waddled out, sobbing, her veil like a drowned jellyfish. The photographer, dripping suds, asked for a cloth. I handed him a napkin from Vivian's cupcake box. He didn't laugh, but I think he wanted to. They left, dragging Vivian through the gate like a wet parade float. She didn't say goodbye, but I heard her scream about lawyers and sabotage. I retrieved the GoPro, checked the footage, and uploaded it to a private drive. Then I sent a clip to my cousin, a lawyer, just in case. That night, I sat by the clean pool, sipping a beer, the stars above. My phone pinged a neighbor. "Heard about the foam. $10 says she tries again." I replied, 20 says she brings a drone. The war wasn't over, but the first battle was mine. And it was a masterpiece. The morning after the foam fiasco, Maple Grove buzzed with a quiet energy, like the calm before a summer storm. I sat by my pool, sipping tea, half expecting an apology from Vivian that never came and fully anticipating retaliation that did. My phone buzzed at 9 a.m. It was a screenshot from a neighbor, Linda, a mom from 2 blocks over. She'd sent me a post from the community Facebook group, timestamped just after midnight. The caption read, "Beware of foam sabotage. Some people in this neighborhood are unhinged and have ruined my once-in-a-lifetime moment." Below it was a blurry still of Vivian, mid-scream in her soaked gown, arms flailing like she was fending off a swarm of bees. I stared at the image, then burst out laughing so hard I nearly spilled my tea. What cracked me up wasn't just the drama. Vivian attempted to rewrite the narrative. She'd cropped the video to make it look like I'd ambushed her, conveniently omitting that she'd trespassed, staged a photo shoot on my property, and declared my pool her backdrop. I texted Linda back. "Predictable." She replied with a laughing emoji and a follow-up. "You letting this slide?" I took a deep breath. Not even a little. I didn't respond to the post publicly. I didn't need to. By noon, the comments section had turned into a neighborhood confessional. People shared their own Vivian horror stories. One neighbor said she'd yelled at their 6-year-old for riding his scooter too close to her limousine. Another recounted how Vivian rang their doorbell at 6 a.m., demanding they move their car because it ruined the bridal party's view. My favorite was a video someone posted of Vivian scolding a bird feeder for being too colorful and stealing focus from her tulip arch. It was clear Vivian hadn't just crossed my Laneshed, alienated half of Maple Grove. That afternoon, while I was in the garage fixing a loose fence panel, I heard voices again, low, sneaky ones. I crept around the side of the house and spotted Vivian's photographer outside my gate, holding a drone and whispering into a headset like he was launching a covert mission. He fumbled the drone when he saw me. I raised an eyebrow. He gave a sheepish wave and said Vivian wanted aerial shots. I asked if he had permission. He didn't answer. I didn't stop him. Instead, I went inside and grabbed a universal remote linked to an old anti-drone jammer I'd bought when a neighbor's kid kept flying over my hot tub. It was legal, just strong enough to force a drone to land. I flicked it on and waited. 2 minutes later, I heard the buzz above my backyard. The drone circled my pool, now crystal clear, the foam long gone. I let it hover over the diving board, then clicked the jammer. The drone jerked, spun, and dipped, crashing softly into the lawn like a confused metal bird. I picked it up and carried it to the gate. The photographer was gone. I stashed the drone in my garage, a trophy for now. Later that evening, my inbox pinged with an HOA email titled Incident at 312 Oak Lane. Vivian had filed a complaint, claiming I'd installed aggressive machinery to harm her guests and used hazardous chemicals to sabotage her photo shoot. She included blurry foam screenshots and suggested I be fined for unsafe pool modifications and disturbing the peace during a sacred event. I read it 3 times, chuckling at the audacity. One attachment, by mistake, showed her slipping mid-scream, a bridesmaid holding a champagne bottle in the background. I drafted a reply, attaching timestamps, footage from 3 camera angles, a copy of my property deed, and a letter from Mike stating the foam was safe and used in corporate events. I reminded the HOA that Vivian had trespassed and suggested they clarify what a shared visual zone meant to prevent others from hijacking private property. I kept it professional but sharp. 2 hours later, I got a reply from an HOA board member, Susan, whom I'd never heard from before. Her email was brief. Thank you for clarifying. Some of us aren't amused by Vivian either. We'll handle it. Her signature included a smiley face that felt oddly menacing for an HOA email. By nightfall, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. Word spread that Tom, Vivian's brother and HOA president, had been forced into an emergency board meeting to address his sister's actions. He was furious, claiming I'd humiliated his family, but he had no leverage. I'd followed every law, every HOA rule, and had footage to prove it. Meanwhile, Vivian posted a black and white photo of herself, soaking wet, staring dramatically at the floor. The caption, "Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from neighbors." She disabled comments, but screenshots flooded my inbox with captions like, "Foam, Queen dethroned." I ended the night by the pool, the water still and clear. I wasn't proud of embarrassing her, but of standing my ground. Vivian thought she could bully her way through because she was loud and connected. She hadn't counted on someone fighting back with logic, evidence, and a sense of humor. I locked the gate, turned off the lights, and kept the drone on a garage shelf. I wasn't returning it yet. Maybe I'd mail it back in a foam-lined box someday. For now, it was a reminder, my yard, my rules. The HOA meeting became the talk of Maple Grove. Held on the clubhouse lawn, it drew a crowd like a summer fair. Neighbors showed up with folding chairs and iced tea, eager to see the drama unfold. I arrived late, deliberately casual, sipping lemonade someone handed me. Tom stood at the front, clipboard in hand, trying to project authority, but his voice wavered. Vivian sat beside him, sporting a neck brace that materialized after her 3rd complaint. When asked about her injury, she claimed the foam made her slip and twist her neck in emotional distress. A board member muttered about spraining credibility. Vivian insisted on presenting her version, showing a heavily edited video that made it look like I'd rigged a chemical attack. The crowd chuckled when it froze on her mascara-streaked face, foam everywhere. I waited for silence, then asked to share my footage. Tom hesitated, but the crowd's murmurs forced his hand. I plugged in my drive and let the unedited video roll, no commentary, just facts. It showed Vivian barging in, staging her shoot, and throwing a tantrum when the foam hit. The bridesmaids looked like they regretted every life choice. When it ended, I asked the crowd, "If this happened in your yard, would you be okay with it?" Silence. Then Susan spoke. "I wouldn't let her near my sidewalk." Another neighbor mentioned Vivian yelling at their cousin for breathing too loudly near her archway. The stories piled: UPA baby shower she tried to reschedule, a car she demanded moved for her view. Someone asked if Tom's family could now claim any property with his blessing. His face reddened. Vivian called it a betrayal. I nearly laughed. The meeting ended without a decision, but the tide had turned. Vivian was no longer the victim, she was the aggressor. Tom looked like a man trying to bail out a sinking boat with a spoon. I left to scattered applause, not of celebration, but relief. Someone had finally said no. The next morning, another cupcake box appeared on my porch, empty except for a note. "Enjoy your 15 minutes." I tossed it, laughing. Then I checked my inbox. A neighbor in digital marketing had seen a clip of the foam incident online and asked if I'd shared it. I hadn't. He sent a link to a community meme page where "Wedding Takeover Gone Wrong" had 10,000 views. Vivian's scream set to dramatic violins. I watched it 3 times. Later, 2 neighbors asked to book my pool for parties. I declined, but got an idea. If Vivian could turn my property into her stage, I'd make it mine on my terms. I set up a website, Bubble Haven, listing the pool for private events, no weddings, no influencers, just foam parties and barbecues. It was petty, brilliant, and perfectly legal. That evening, Vivian showed up unannounced, no gown, just rage. She stormed through the gate, eyes blazing. "You think you're clever?" she spat. I asked her to leave, recording on my phone. She ranted about dignity and sabotage. I let her talk for a minute, then pointed out the camera. She froze, stormed off, and I saved the video to my just-in-case folder. The foam had settled, but the ripples were spreading. I hadn't just defended my yard, I'd made it a symbol of standing up to entitlement. The ripples from the foam incident hadn't just stirred Maple Grove, they'd turned it into a battleground of whispers, memes, and newfound camaraderie. My backyard, once a quiet retreat, was now the neighborhood's unofficial monument to standing up to bullies. But Vivian wasn't done. She was too stubborn, too invested in her image, to slink away. Instead, she doubled down, announcing on social media a redemption shoot to reclaim her joy and fix what had been stolen. The post featured a filtered photo of her in a glittery dress, the caption dripping with passive-aggressive venom. "My story will not be defined by foam." Comments ranged from fake sympathy to outright curiosity, but one thing was clear: nobody in Maple Grove was offering their yard for her comeback. Every gate had closed. I wasn't surprised. Vivian's reign of terror had burned too many bridges. Neighbors who once tolerated her out of politeness now swapped stories of her demands with glee. The elderly couple down the street recounted how she'd scolded their terrier for disrupting her zen. Another family shared how she'd tried to commandeer their driveway for her limousine's grand exit. Her entitlement had united us in a way no block party ever could. Still, I had a hunch she hadn't learned a thing. I kept my cameras charged and my gate locked, waiting for her next move. It came on a Friday evening, just as the sunset painted my pool in shades of amber. My side camera caught movement, not a delivery driver, but Vivian, tiptoeing down the path in heels, a cocktail dress clinging to her like a second skin. Her hair was piled in elaborate curls, and she clutched a selfie stick like it was a lifeline. No photographer, no bridesmaids, just Vivian and her delusion. She glanced around, then pushed open my gate, moving like a thief who believed she belonged. I watched the feed from my living room, torn between amusement and disbelief. She stepped onto my patio, faced the pool, and raised her phone, narrating in a hushed, dramatic tone. "I have returned," she whispered, as if addressing a legion of followers. "After all I've endured, I've chosen to forgive, to rebuild, to reclaim my peace." It wasn't a photo shoot, it was a performance, a desperate attempt to rewrite her humiliation as a tale of triumph. She leaned toward the pool, angling for the sunset's reflection, one hand on her chest, eyes closed like she was in a soap opera. That was my moment. No foam, this time just a quiet click from the motion detector I'd installed. A soft beep sounded from the bushes, and then the sprinklers roared to life. A jet of water hit Vivian square in the back. She screamed, slipped, and landed on her side. A sequined mermaid washed ashore. Her phone skidded across the tile, landing screen down in the grass. She scrambled up, soaked and furious, water streaming down her face, curling her lashes into clumps. I stepped outside, phone recording. "You don't learn, do you?" I said calmly. She glared, teeth clenched. "You set me up again." I reminded her she was trespassing again, recording herself doing it again. She tried to march off with dignity but slipped, grabbing the gatepost to steady herself. "This isn't over," she shouted. "No," I called back, "but you're soaked." The gate slammed. I reviewed the footage, saved it to my growing archive, and poured a glass of wine. I didn't need to share it. Maple Grove's grapevine was faster than fiber optic internet. By morning, Vivian's redemption post had vanished, no update, no explanation. Someone reported seeing her walking home, mascara streaked, algae in her hair. Another heard her ranting to Tom about lawsuits. Tom, meanwhile, had gone quiet, avoiding public appearances since the HOA meeting. The real victory came 2 days later in a formal HOA letter. Signed by 3 board members, it apologized for the events of the past week and confirmed Vivian had been warned for repeated violations. Tom had stepped down as president, citing a conflict of interest. Susan, the no-nonsense board member, was interim president. She included a handwritten note. "Consider the foam situation resolved. Great camera angles." It was the closest thing to a high five I'd ever gotten from the HOA. Maple Grove felt lighter after that. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years waved or stopped to chat. An elderly couple dropped off lemon bars with a note. "Thanks for standing your ground." I hadn't realized how much tension Vivian had sown until it lifted. But she wasn't done, not quite. A week after the sprinkler incident, a young man knocked on my door, asking to rent the pool for a photo project. He claimed to be with a startup media team, but his story unraveled when I pressed for details. He mumbled about a private client and left, forgetting a folder with the initials VM scrawled on it. It was pathetic, almost sad. I upgraded my gate lock, added a new fence camera, and updated my Bubble Haven website with stricter rules. No weddings, no influencers, no Vivians. The message was clear, even if worded politely. The foam had settled, the pool was calm, and peace had returned. Vivian moved out of Tom's house shortly after, her moving truck pulling away on a Tuesday. I watched from behind my curtains, not out of spite, but for closure. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. Her legacy was a soggy memory, a cautionary tale of entitlement gone wrong. The weeks that followed were like a deep exhale. No more surprise photo shoots, no HOA power plays, just the quiet rhythm of suburban life. My pool sparkled each morning, undisturbed except by the occasional leaf or curious squirrel. Neighbors started dropping by not just to gossip about Vivian, but to connect. One brought a mug that said "Bubble Boss" and refused to say where he got it. Another handed me a flyer for a foam fest, a tongue-in-cheek party idea someone had mocked up. Music, snacks, no Vivians allowed. I laughed it off, but the idea stuck. If the neighborhood wanted to celebrate, why not lean into it? I called Mike, who was thrilled to supply more biodegradable foam with an upgraded mix. I spent days cleaning the pool deck, testing the foam rig, and setting up simple decorations: floating chairs, string lights, and a speaker for music. I wanted it to feel like a release, a way to wash away the chaos and replace it with something good. Foam Fest wasn't advertised, but word spread. The first guest arrived early with a cooler and a grin. By sunset, my backyard was alive with 20 neighbors, laughing and lounging as foam cascaded over the pool. Kids played tag through the bubbles, adults sipped drinks, and a golden retriever vanished into the foam, reappearing like a soggy magician. Susan showed up with brownies and asked if she could officially approve the event. I handed her sunglasses and pointed to a reserved lawn chair. She stayed an hour, not as the HOA president, but as a neighbor. That, more than anything, showed how far we'd come. Midway through, someone set up a projector and played the foam footage on my house's wall. The crowd watched in silence as Vivian's takeover unfolded: her demands, her shrieks, the foam swallowing her dreams. When she slipped and screamed, laughter erupted, not cruel, but cathartic. We weren't mocking her pain. We were reclaiming our space. After the last guest left, I stood by the pool, watching the bubbles dissolve. It was strange to think a simple backyard had become a battleground for ego and boundaries, and that something as absurd as foam had helped me hold the line. Foam Fest marked a turning point for Maple Grove, a moment when the neighborhood reclaimed its spirit from the clutches of Vivian's wedding tyranny. My backyard, once a battleground, became a symbol of defiance and community. The pool glittered under the morning sun, free of uninvited guests, and I settled back into my routine: coffee on the patio, gardening in the afternoons, and evening walks with a quiet satisfaction. But the story of the foam wasn't fading. It was growing, spreading beyond our cul-de-sacs into something bigger, something that took on a life of its own. A week after Foam Fest, my inbox pinged with a message from a local video creator named Ethan. He'd seen a clip of the foam incident circulating in private group chats and wanted permission to feature it in a YouTube series about suburban absurdities. He offered anonymity and a small payment. I declined the money but gave the green light, asking only that he keep the footage respectful and accurate. 2 days later, the video dropped with the title, "When a Bride Took Over a Backyard Pool." It racked up thousands of views in hours. By the end of the week, someone had remixed Vivian's scream into a dance track, complete with a looping foam wave. I watched it once, chuckled, and logged off. The video's spread brought new attention to my pool. Neighbors I barely knew started asking if the story was true, their eyes wide with curiosity. I'd reply with a photo of the pool, calm, clear, no foam, just sunshine. That was enough. The truth didn't need shouting. But the legend of the bubble boss grew quietly. People stopped by with stories of their run-ins with entitled neighbors, as if my stand against Vivian had unlocked a shared language of resistance. One woman told me about a guy who'd parked his RV in her driveway for a week, claiming it was temporary. Another shared how their HOA president, before Tom, tried to ban backyard barbecues because they lowered property values. My foam stunt, it seemed, had struck a universal chord. The HOA, under Susan's interim leadership, was changing too. Meetings became less about nitpicking rules and more about building community. Susan floated the idea of renaming the annual summer kickoff party. Someone suggested Foam Fest. The room laughed, but nobody shot it down. I kept the foam machine in my garage, cleaned and ready, not because I planned to use it again, but because it felt like a silent guardian. A reminder that my fence wasn't just wood, it was a line between respect and assumption. Vivian's name faded from conversation, replaced by new neighbors and new stories. But her shadow lingered in small ways. A month after she left, I found a crumpled flyer in my mailbox for a wedding photography special from a local studio. It wasn't Vivian's, but the timing felt like a ghost of her ambition. I tossed it and moved on. Maple Grove was healing, and I was content to let the past dissolve like foam in the pool. Then came the curveball. One crisp October morning, I got a call from Linda, the neighbor who'd sent me the first screenshot of Vivian's Facebook post. Her voice was equal parts amused and alarmed. "You're not gonna believe this," she said. "Vivian's back." My stomach tightened. Back? As in moved back. No, Linda clarified. She's doing some kind of event at the community center. A bridal empowerment workshop. She's advertising it as a comeback, saying she's turned her trials into inspiration. I laughed, but it was tinged with unease. Vivian hadn't just slunk away, she was trying to spin her humiliation into a brand. I pulled up the community center's website. Sure enough, there was a flyer, From Setbacks to Sparkle, a bridal empowerment workshop with Vivian Marshall. The description promised transformative lessons from her challenging wedding journey, with tips on overcoming obstacles and owning your moment. The event was scheduled for Saturday, and tickets were $50 a pop. I didn't plan to go. I had no interest in Vivian's redemption tour. But Linda and a few other neighbors were curious, and they convinced me to tag along, not to confront her, but to see how far she'd stretch the truth. "It'll be like watching a train wreck in slow motion," Linda said. I reluctantly agreed, if only to keep an eye on things. Saturday arrived, and the community center was packed, mostly with young women in their 20s clutching notebooks and iced coffees. A few Maple Grove locals were there, whispering and exchanging glances. Vivian took the stage in a white jumpsuit, her hair swept into a perfect updo, radiating confidence. The backdrop was a massive photo of her in her wedding gown, pre-foam, glowing against the sunset. My pool, I realized with a jolt. She was using my property as her inspirational backdrop. Her speech started innocently enough tips on wedding planning, staying calm under pressure. But then she veered into her trials. Without naming me, she described a hostile neighbor who'd sabotaged her photo shoot with dangerous chemicals out of jealousy. The crowd gasped. She painted herself as a victim who'd risen above, turning betrayal into empowerment. It was a masterclass in revisionist history, and it made my blood boil. Linda nudged me. You gonna let her get away with that? I didn't want to make a scene. But when Vivian opened the floor for questions, a neighbor, Claire, stood up. Claire was a retired teacher, soft-spoken but sharp as a tack. I live in Maple Grove, she said calmly. I know the story you're talking about. That neighbor didn't sabotage you. You trespassed on his property, ignored his requests to leave, and got upset when he defended his home. Isn't the real lesson here about respecting boundaries? The room went silent. Vivian's smile froze, then twitched. That's a misunderstanding, she said, her voice tight. I had permission from the HOA. Claire didn't back down. The HOA doesn't own private property. You didn't have the homeowner's consent. There's video proof. Murmurs spread. Vivian tried to pivot, saying the workshop wasn't about past conflicts, but moving forward. But the damage was done. A few attendees started whispering, pulling out their phones. I later learned some had found the YouTube video and were watching it in real time. Vivian wrapped up early, citing a scheduling issue, and left the stage to tepid applause. As we walked out, Linda was grinning. She thought she could rewrite history, but Maple Grove's got a long memory. The workshop was Vivian's last gasp in our neighborhood. Word spread that ticket sales barely covered the venue, and the community center didn't invite her back. But the incident lit a spark. Neighbors started talking about how entitlement like Vivian's wasn't just a personal flaw, it was a pattern. We'd all seen it. The coworker who takes credit for your work, the driver who cuts you off and flips you off, the neighbor who thinks rules don't apply. My foam stunt had become more than a prank, it was a stand against that mindset, a reminder that boundaries matter. I leaned into the momentum. Bubble Haven started getting inquiries not from influencers, but from families wanting low-key events. I hosted a kid's birthday party with a small foam setup, and the joy on those kids' faces as they dove into the bubbles was worth every minute of setup. I donated the fee to a local charity, which earned me a write-up in the town paper. The headline, Maple Grove Man Turns Backyard Battle into Community Win. I cringed at the attention, but couldn't deny it felt good. Meanwhile, the HOA was thriving under Susan. She organized a neighborhood cleanup, a potluck, even a lessons learned meeting where we discussed how to prevent another Vivian situation. One idea was a clear policy on private property rights, which passed unanimously. Another was a community watch group, not for crime, but for entitled behavior. We called it Foam Patrol, half joking but fully committed. As winter approached, I thought the saga was over. Vivian was gone, Maple Grove was united, and my pool was mine again. But one chilly November evening, I got a text from Ethan, the video creator. Check this out, he wrote, with a link to a new YouTube video. It was a compilation called Top 10 Entitled Neighbor Fails, and my foam incident was number 1. It had millions of views, comments flooding in from strangers who dealt with their own Vivians. This guy's a hero, one wrote. Wish I'd thought of foam, said another. I watched the video, then closed my laptop. Fame wasn't my goal, but impact was. Vivian had tried to take my space, my peace, my neighborhood. Instead, she'd given us a ridiculous, foam-filled story that reminded us what we could do when we stood together. Winter settled over Maple Grove, blanketing the neighborhood in a quiet chill that matched the calm in my backyard. The pool, covered for the season, sat undisturbed, its surface free of foam, footprints, or uninvited brides. The saga of Vivian Marshall had become a local legend, a story swapped over coffee or during shoveling sessions in driveways. My role as the bubble boss lingered in playful nicknames and knowing nods from neighbors, but life was returning to its steady rhythm: morning coffee, afternoon tinkering in the garage, evening walks under streetlights. Yet, the impact of that summer's battle wasn't fading. It was evolving, weaving itself into the fabric of our community and beyond. The YouTube video, Top 10 Entitled Neighbor Fails, had turned my foam stunt into an internet phenomenon. Comments poured in from across the country, people sharing their tales of boundary-crossing neighbors, overzealous HOAs, and small victories against entitlement. "This guy's my hero," one user wrote. "I'm buying a foam machine tomorrow," another joked. The video's reach brought emails from podcasters and bloggers wanting interviews, but I declined. I wasn't chasing fame, I just wanted my yard back. Still, the attention had a ripple effect. Local businesses started asking about Bubble Haven rentals, and I hosted a few foam parties for charity events, each one cementing Maple Grove's newfound sense of unity. The HOA, under Susan's leadership, was a different beast now. Gone were the days of petty fines and power plays. Susan ran meetings like a seasoned mediator, encouraging input and shutting down drama before it started. The Foam Patrol idea, born half in jest, became a real initiative, group of volunteers who kept an eye out for entitled behavior, not with confrontation, but with quiet documentation and support. They'd helped one family resolve a dispute with a neighbor who kept parking across their driveway, and another time, they backed a renter facing unfair HOA fees. It wasn't about vigilante justice. It was about community accountability, a lesson Vivian had inadvertently taught us. One frosty January morning, I was sipping coffee in my kitchen when Linda texted me a link to a new community Facebook post. "You're not gonna believe this," she wrote. I clicked, expecting another meme or a nostalgic foam reference. Instead, it was a public apology from Tom, Vivian's brother and former HOA president. The post was short but stunning. "I owe Maple Grove an apology. I let personal bias cloud my judgment, allowing my sister's actions to disrupt our community. I've stepped back to reflect and learn. Thank you for holding the line." Below it, comments from neighbors were kind but firm, acknowledging his accountability while reminding him of the chaos he'd enabled. I reread the post, surprised but impressed. Tom had been silent since stepping down, and I'd assumed he'd left Maple Grove for good. Linda later told me he'd moved to a nearby town, but wanted to clear the air before starting fresh. It was a rare moment of humility, one I hadn't expected. I didn't respond to the post, but I sent Susan a quick email, suggesting the HOA publicly acknowledge Tom's gesture to close that chapter. She did, and the neighborhood moved on, stronger for it. Vivian, meanwhile, had vanished from the public eye. Rumors swirled that she'd tried pitching her bridal empowerment workshop in another city, but it flopped. Her social media went quiet, her once vibrant posts replaced by radio silence. Part of me wondered if she'd learned anything, but I didn't dwell on it. Her absence was enough. Maple Grove didn't need her drama to thrive. As spring approached, the neighborhood planned its annual summer kickoff party, and Foam Fest was officially added to the agenda. Susan called me to ask if I'd bring the foam machine. "It's not a party without bubbles," she said, laughing. I agreed, on the condition that it stay low-key, no influencers, no wedding planners. The event was a hit, kids diving into foam piles, adults dancing to a local band, and a potluck table groaning with casseroles and pies. I stood by the pool, watching neighbors who'd barely spoken a year ago now laughing together, and felt a quiet pride. Vivian had tried to divide us, but she'd ended up uniting us instead. The foam machine stayed in my garage after that, a relic of the battle, but also a promise. I didn't need to use it again, but knowing it was there, ready to defend my space, felt right. I upgraded my backyard security, new cameras, a sturdier gate lock, and a sign that read "Private Property, no photo shoots." It was polite but clear, a final line in the sand. One warm April evening, I got an unexpected visitor. Claire, the retired teacher who'd called out Vivian at the workshop, stopped by with a bottle of wine and a story. She'd been mentoring a young woman in her church who'd faced a similar situation, a coworker stealing credit for her ideas and bullying her into silence. Claire had shared my foam story, not as a prank, but as an example of standing up creatively and firmly. The young woman had confronted her coworker, documented the theft, and won a promotion. "You didn't just save your yard," Claire said, raising her glass. "You gave people a playbook." Her words stuck with me. The foam wasn't just about Vivian, it was about every time someone assumes they can take what's not theirs, whether it's a backyard, a job, or a voice. My fight had been small, but its echoes were big. Neighbors now greeted each other with warmth, shared tools and recipes, and checked in during storms. Maple Grove wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we'd fought to keep it that way. I ended the season with a quiet ritual. On a sunny May morning, I uncovered the pool, cleaned its edges, and sat by the water with a coffee. The surface was still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. No drones buzzed overhead. No heels clicked down my path. The battle was over, the victory clear. Vivian had thought she could stage her fantasy on my property, but she'd underestimated me, my neighbors, and the power of a community that says, enough. The truth had floated to the surface, just like the foam. And it was a truth worth celebrating not with fanfare, but with the simple joy of a backyard that was mine again, shared only with those I chose. The story of the foam wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to Maple Grove, to every person who'd laughed at the video, to every stranger who'd typed hero in a comment. It was a reminder that entitlement crumbles when met with resolve, humor, and a little creativity. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about the bigger picture. Vivian's actions weren't unique. Entitlement, bullying, and injustice pop up everywhere, from workplaces to neighborhoods to the world at large. My foam machine couldn't fix those problems, but it had shown what's possible when you refuse to back down. Maple Grove had drawn a line, and we'd held it together. I invite you, dear reader, to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced a Vivian in your life, someone who tried to take what wasn't theirs? How did you respond? What do you think about using creative tactics like foam to fight back against injustice? And where do you draw the line between justice and revenge? Let's talk about standing up, pushing back, and the messy, human struggle against entitlement. Your voice matters. Add it to the story.